was that since that period under European colonization and then subsequently 25 years of Mexican occupation and then ultimately the last 170 years of American occupation, is that northern New Mexico has always been marginalized politically, socially, culturally, economically more than anything. We've always been marginalized and we've never been of much importance to Washington or to Mexico City, which were the two centers of power for us over the past 400 years. So as a result of that, a lot of bad things happened. We didn't get the latest advances. We did sort of exist in a cultural, political vacuum. The good news was that I said this last night, we're so behind, we're on the cutting edge of all these new movements. We said, well, don't use pesticides. Well, we couldn't afford pesticides. Literally, and I'll give you another anecdote. I only have 3. So another anecdote, we are building these cooperatives in these different villages, these farmers co-ops, ecotourism co-ops, and housing co-ops. But we have to get certified organic by the New Mexico Commodities Commission. They go out, they do soil tests, they ask you, when's the last time you bought fertilizer, at the store, at the feed store? And said, the last time? Are you kidding? We've never been able to afford fertilizer. And sure enough, when they look at the soil, it's just absolutely pure. So like I say, we're so far behind, we're on the cutting edge. So we need to, it's just a matter of reapplying what we have currently at our disposal and reapplying it so that we can create a livable income for our communities. We have the most important thing. What do you think is the single most, what you probably know this, I'm talking to the choir, but just for the fun of it. What's the single biggest obstacle to a young farmer wanting to become a farmer?
Land.
What, land prices?
Exactly. It's so expensive. And in northern New Mexico, we still have held on, despite of, because we've been sort of abandoned and ignored, we still own senior water rights, and we still own arable land. So it's another one of those things that we do, now it's saying, oh, water's precious. Oh, really? Oh my God. Well, that's great, we have it. So the single biggest obstacle to becoming a new farmer or re-becoming farmers through our family history is not an obstacle. We do have arable land. I was mentioning last night, Rio Arriba County has 46,000 acres still of arable land. That is land with water rights. And most of it is not being used. And if we don't use it, we definitely will lose it. I believe that, and you know this better than I do, I'll say this, but I believe the state engineer's ruling is on water. You use it or you lose it. Is that correct? Yes. So the problem is a lot of our farmers are flooding their fields to hold on to the water rights, but they're just growing alfalfa or hay or whatever, and that's not the highest and best use. So all we have to do is reuse that thing, use that resource in a better way. And then finally, we have to do more than just react to a dominant culture and what has come down in terms of preventing us or stopping us from doing a lot of our work. Part of our process in our own communities is to re-educate ourselves about what are traditions that we want to hold on to that are fantastic, that we need to rebuild and strengthen our communities, and what aren't. What are traditions that were fantastic in their day that we wanted to pursue, that were important to a worldview that we lived, and what aren't. So one example is we're beginning a long-term drought here. Actually, we're going back to normal. We had a 100-year spike. If you look at tree rings over the past 10,000 years in New Mexico, we were down here at this space down here, and then we get a 100-year spike starting in 1880s maybe, and we did 100 years of way above average rainfall, and now we're going down that slippery slope back to normal. But normal is not anything we know. In our recent history, our people don't recall those drought days. You guys do, because your view of time and history is very different, Clayton. But basically, now we can't, I think we've been used to doing flood irrigation, and we've been doing crops like alfalfa that requires a lot of water and it requires flood irrigation. We're going to have to rethink that tradition and go to drip irrigation. We're going to have to get away, I think, from alfalfa, which ultimately means possibly we're going to have to stop thinking that raising cattle, small herds of cattle, is a viable alternative economic activity for us. That's not going to be easy to change that attitude because we're so tied into the cattle growing culture deeply ingrained in us, but ultimately we're going to have to make those hard decisions internally. We're going to have to make the changes in our own culture so that we can become open to new technologies and survive in this drought condition, because this is the worst snowpack in recorded since they've been recording this stuff in turn of the century.
2012, 2013,
Yeah,
snowpack, worst?
yes, it's the worst ever.
What do you think the normal precip's going to be? What it used to be, what's it?
Well, it's used to be, we get about 7 or 9 inches per year. I don't know what we've got so far this year, but I know we're probably 2 inches below that. But the snowpack just isn't there, and what we do have is going to be gone by June.
Predictions are a 30% decrease
30%.
over on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
So about 5 inches a year is going to be the new normal.
Yeah. So we're going to have to adapt to that, and here we are. I'm out there, bells and whistles on, trying to encourage people to plant and say, but the way we do it is we say, as a condition to really do this, we have to educate ourselves, and let's go right away from day one. Let's go to drip irrigation. Let's go to crops that are more drought resistant. And the great thing is, our neighbors, the Native Americans who have only been here about 12 or 15,000 years, actually know how to do this. And Clayton will talk about that more. So basically, that concludes my comments. I just want to do a more informal, anecdotal discussion about that, and I'm going to let the experts talk more.
I know that you've been with the different groups or different farmers have been working with the CRP program that I'm part of here at UNM and other groups in regards to trying to understand the relationship of land and water with the acequias and the habitats it's drawn. I was just reading an article as part of some research that I'm doing that is contradicting the concept of changing the acequia systems to drip irrigation, because there's some data coming out that's saying that drip irrigation actually accelerates in the long run the depletion of the soil and runoff in that, and that actually may not be advantageous, to do that in northern New Mexico. That it needs to be application. Have you run into this?
No, you can talk about this more facilities, but let me put it this way. So we're not going to adapt 100%, but what we do is the acequias still run through the communities, and they're still getting water into the riparian areas and keeping the creatures and the plants alive. But when they get to my specific farm, then I have a holding pond, and then I run it through. So I don't know that I'm not enough of a scientist. I'm just an old, overgrown organizer. So I don't know the science of it, but these guys can talk about it. You guys want to respond to that, facilities?
I can.
Go ahead.
I could just say that an acequia system isn't just the ditch bank or the ditch in which that water runs. An acequia is more so the entire community. So when you're talking of issues of, let's say for instance, lack of water, we kind of are forced to have to seek alternative methods. For example, here in the South Valley of Albuquerque, we just had a meeting with MRGCD, and turns out we're not going to have water, past maybe then May. So what does that mean for farmers who traditionally flood their systems with the acequia? Well, come June, they're not going to have water. So that means they're not going to have a crop. So in that type of aspect, we're kind of forced to have to seek ulterior methods, in the sense of having a cistern or a holding pond to preserve that water, to hold that water, so we can continue irrigating our crops through those systems. Now, as a whole, the acequia does so much. There's such a benefit for the acequia system to be running as a whole. It recharges the aquifer, it cleans the earth, many different things. It also just supports the community aspect. Acequias isn't just a matter of opening the water and letting the water. I mean, when you are part of a culture that relies on a system of irrigation such as the acequia, it's a lifestyle. It's deeper than just turning on the water. You have to know how to move the water. It's a culture that encourages community. It's a culture that encourages people coming together and following each other's lead. It's a system that encourages leadership growth within communities and knowledge and stuff like that. So to tie back to what you had mentioned about flood irrigation being better than, traditionally, yes, that's definitely the case. When you flood irrigate, you recharge the aquifer, the system as a whole operates more healthy, our aquifers recharge, we have groundwater. We're living in a time where most of our groundwater is being depleted by Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Los Alamos, Intel. I mean, we could go along all of the lines, so our aquifer is struggling. When our aquifer struggles, our ground, anything above it also, has that, it has a reaction, and to us, we believe that's a negative reaction. So, yes, drip irrigation isn't as effective in a holistic perspective to agriculture and just the agrarian heritage, but when we're living in a time where there is a huge lack of water and we still want to continue our cultural path or our traditional paths of growing food for our communities, it's very important for us to be able to get with the program and understand other ways of saving water, and hopefully that, as we start to learn more about drip irrigation, we can learn more about the quality and the life and the diversity of the soil and the health of the soil, so we can, apply other traditional practices or other practices like cover crop to help replenish the soil and improve that soil's quality.
What about you, Cliff?
Just maybe two things. He answered it. I think I should add it. Actually, what I have understood is that the word acequia is a Moorish word, and that means the law of thirst. And so it's,
Could you repeat that?
the law of thirst.
Okay.
And our approach has been that if we continue to build the soils that are healthy, that even if we have less water, that soil is going to hold it better, and that's our approach. You could have really poor soils, and you could have tons of water, you're still not going to produce anything. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about this morning is about culture and agriculture, and I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Clayton Brockopay. I live in my wife's community of Tisuca Pueblo, which is just north of Santa Fe. I guess I'm many things. I'm first, I guess a father, a husband, a grandfather, and I happen to, I guess, kind of follow. I do farm. I'm a farmer, and some years back, I and a number of other people started a nonprofit organization. So I'm a program director of it's called Traditional Native American Farmers Association. And as I sort of mentioned briefly last night, was that when I and my wife met and we decided to get married, one of our aspirations was to farm and raise our children in that manner, so that they knew those things. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do that, you sort of decide to do something, was that we both, I come from a different community than she did, but they're very similar. I'm actually a Mohawk, and I came from our territories, which border what's now the United States, northeastern United States, and Canada. And so a lot of the issues that we're talking about, we've also seen those, experienced those issues, border issues, political issues, and so forth. But even though we had lived very separate, geographically, our lives sort of were very, very similar. And we were both born at a time when there was some changes happening within our communities, and one of the things that we did see was that the decline in the amount of agriculture being practiced in our communities. I'm very careful to say it that way because it was not a decline in the agriculture, but just a decline in the amount of agriculture that's being done. The type of agriculture always excelled. It was an excellent form of agriculture that always, I guess, took that approach of working with the environment, working with the land, and building community. So that's, I had my experiences. I worked very young on gardens, sustainable, or what they call subsistence gardens, very large, could be considered farms. And then I worked on a lot of different types of commercial operations. That was my experience, because I actually enjoyed it, even though it's very hard, tiresome and stuff, but it's probably, to me, is the most enjoyable time that any human could experience. And so that was our decision, to raise our children in that manner, and we set about to doing that. And even at that point, we kept seeing, a lot of the older people, after they passed away, that their families weren't, I won't say weren't interested, but weren't able to continue, like our tutor had mentioned. And so we decided to try to reverse that trend and become maybe, hopefully, an example that, you could also do all these other things, right? And farm at the same time. And we did find, I and my wife traveled United States and Canada, and we even went further than that. We've continued to do that and see that it wasn't just us with that mindset, that there was people nationally and internationally. Even we've been invited to other conferences that we've met globally. People were thinking the same thing that we had in our hearts to try to achieve. The formation of this organization actually came out of a meeting that was called by another organization called Native Seed Search. They're based in Tucson, Arizona, and they were addressing the losing seed diversity primarily in the Southwest and northern Mexico. And at that point in time, to me, it didn't seem like a huge issue, but once we started talking with other farmers, we really began to realize that it was a very huge issue of the loss of diversity of seeds, and now it's coming back to some of these issues of drought and climate change and so forth. And that loss of diversity is actually a challenge to us too, because the more diversity you have, the more I'd say that the farmers or communities have in their arsenal to address those issues. But when we went to this meeting, there was, I believe, around 70 farmers, families from both Arizona and New Mexico. And there was two younger family farmers present at that meeting. Us, our family, my wife, myself, and our youngest daughter went with us, and another family, younger family from Arizona. But the rest of them were all more elderly farmers. And that's the case nationally. I think the average age of a farmer in the United States is somewhere like 65 or 67, some crazy number like that. And only 1% or 1.5% of the population in the United States is actually engaged as a farmer or that type of thing. So the same thing is happening in our communities. And what we heard from the older farmers, one was that they wanted to encourage the young people to back engage as planting as farmers or agriculturalists for a number of different reasons, and I'll get into that. They also noticed that when the less and less people that were farming in our communities, they also were observing that the physical health of our people was in decline. The Native American communities probably have the highest percentage of people with diabetes in the nation. And then they also noticed that they were making those observations that they noticed that there was a decline of people farming in the community. There's also a social decline. People weren't as respectful to each other as families, maybe even within their own families, with other community members, and the lack of respect between the younger generation and the older generation, which was really critical to our lasting as a people. And I'll say the same thing too. You see those things on national TV, not just in our communities, but nationwide, right? Just a lack of disrespect of life in general. So that was kind of our idea, is that when I and my wife were talking about things, we had seen that too and wanted to reverse that trend, try to reverse that trend. Our physical health, feeding our children well, but also rebuilding our communities into vibrant, caring, sharing, and loving one another as other human beings, not just within our community, but the humanity, worldwide, I'll say. And again, that was our discussion as two young people, and then we found out later, many years later, that those discussions were happening with all peoples, I'll say, internationally. We've been invited a number of times to an event that's hosted by an organization called Slow Food, where we did get to meet farmers, herdsmen, fishermen, all those types of things internationally. And even though there's sometimes language barriers, we still can communicate with each other on that level. So the act of agriculture, basically of planting, and I want to show a picture, if I can find it, and I'll continue to talk here, hopefully, that hopefully I can find it. We wanted to, like I said, sort of rebuild our communities to what our parents, seeing some change in our grandparents, and even our great-parents were still, I guess, engaged in. And when you, I'm probably going to have a hard time finding it, but hopefully I'll be able to do it. It was actually a picture I showed last night of myself, one of my children, and my grandchildren planting a field.
I saw it.
And for some reason or another, I can't find it, but I'm going to put one up. It's not us planting, but this is a very isolated community in north central Arizona, and it's on the Navajo reservation, and it's very immense. There's no electricity out there. There's no, surface water, so they have to haul water, but they're still able to. They're talking about the same thing that we're talking about building community, building the resilience back into our families and our communities. And this is a cornfield, it's dryland farmed, and the bare area in the front is actually another variety of corn. So they've stacked in time so that they wouldn't cross-pollinate. And that was some of the things that we're trying to teach some of our community members about. I talked a little bit about threat of contamination to our corns and that type of thing. And I had mentioned earlier that through our oral histories and our oral knowledge and education is that corn isn't just something that that feeds us nutritionally, but it feeds us in many, many other different aspects. And this origin stories of corn in our communities, they say that corn is the same as we as people. We're one and the same. There's no distinction between corn and us as people. And perhaps maybe this is why I bring this and have it on our one of these little books I carry around that it sort of somewhat illustrates that. But it also we have sacred colors in different directions, and these represent those sacred colors. There's actually two other ones that are missing because there's 4 directions, and there's above us and below us too. So there's two other corns that represent those. I don't have them here, but we do have them. We do grow them. This was gifted to me by a Hopi farmer in northern Arizona. You might think this photograph, and it's in there. I showed it last night. This is a photograph of this, but this is actually corns that I and my family and my grandchildren have grown over a number of years. So, again, to me, it's a nice illustration of that. But when human beings, indigenous, whomever, when they first started engaging in agriculture, meaning that their communities were set into place, the political organizations that we have were also based on agriculture. The timing, all of those things, everything that we see and hear and that we have as a culture, as a civilization, is based from agriculture. Our music, our arts, our pottery, our poetry is based on agriculture. And when that starts to fragment, so all those other things begin to fragment. The best story that I have, and then I'll hand it over to Jose Luis, is that when we start engaging in these things, we actually did begin to see a lot of our young people in our communities, our rural communities, and actually in our urban communities really grabbed onto this, and they really wanted this. It was like they were hungry for these things, hungry for good food, hungry for good community, hungry for a good physical health. To me, what is the most valuable thing that we have in the world today? Is it our car? Is it our homes? To me, it's our good health, right, and our families. And I was able to, as I said before, this organization that we formed, I was able to travel around, meet a lot of different people, and after the organization did form, I was actually able to do that and even more so and connect with farmers. And when you visit farmers, to me, they're the most enjoyable people to meet, the most hopeful people, even though we're facing droughts and all this stuff, we're facing poverty, we're facing